She was taller than anything he had expected to find at his gate. She stood at the edge of his land and looked at him the way people look at something they have not decided about yet. Her hair was black and thick, loose over her shoulders. Her skin was grey-green. Her hands were still. She did not step forward. She just waited. Then she asked, "Do you have a mate, human?" He answered her 3 words. Those 3 words changed everything that came after them. 3 months before that morning, Eli Marsh had come to the property with a wagon, a mule, and very little else. The land had been described to him as farmable. He supposed it was if you were generous with the word. The east fence had collapsed into the scrub. The roof above the larder drooped on one side, like a tired man's shoulder. The fields had gone to dry brush and hard clay, and whatever had grown there last season had given up and left its roots in the ground as evidence of the attempt. There were a lot of things on this land that had tried and quit. He stood in the yard and looked at it in the cold morning light. The sun had not cleared the ridge yet. He could see his breath. He set to work. He fixed the east fence first. Then he patched the roof above the larder, board by board, until the sag was gone. He turned the clay along the south field and planted what he did not expect would come up. He hauled water from the creek, and he chopped wood, and he repaired the gate hinge twice, because the first repair did not hold. He did not mind. He had nothing else he needed to be doing. It was the kind of work a man does when he needs his hands busy. He was good at it. He had always been good at it. The nearest settlement was 3 miles east, a place called Grayford, humans mostly, but not entirely. He had been into town twice for supplies since arriving. Both times he had paid for what he needed, loaded the cart, and come back without speaking to anyone longer than the transaction required. He was not avoiding anyone. He just did not have much to say yet. He had been alone for a year before the land. Alone the year before that too, though that one had not been his choice. His wife had died the winter before last. Her name was Kara. She had been sick for 3 months, and then she had not been sick anymore, and that was the shape of it. He did not think about it in long, careful sequences anymore. It was more like weather now. It moved through him when it came, and he let it move, and then he went back to what he had been doing. There was a stone on the window sill of the main room. Small, flat, pale grey, the kind of stone that gets smooth from water and time. She had carried it in her coat pocket for years. After she died, he had put it on the windowsill because he did not know what else to do with it. There, it had stayed. That evening, after the fence work, he came inside and saw it sitting where it always sat, in what was left of the light. He picked it up without thinking about it, turned it once in his hand. He never did. The days settled into a pattern. He was up before the light and working before the dew was off the grass. He repaired the gap in the south field wall where something had come through it in the winter, stones placed back one by one until the line held. He dug a drainage channel along the low side of the east field so the spring runoff would not sit and rot the seed. He replaced the well rope where it had frayed near the bucket, and he replaced the bucket itself, which had a slow split along one stave that would fail before summer if he left it. The land was not hopeless. He had seen worse. It was the kind of ground that had been let go too long and needed someone to pay attention to it before it would give anything back, and he understood that arrangement better than most. One morning he went into Grayford for nails and seed corn and a draw knife, the one in the barn having lost its edge past any reasonable sharpening. Grayford was not a large town. A mill, a smithy, a general goods store, 2 taverns he had no use for. The main road was wide enough for 2 carts to pass, and on a market morning it was nearly that crowded. There were orcs in the market square. Not many, but present. They kept to the eastern end, near the grain seller and the cordage merchant. The humans kept to the western end. In the middle, there was a strip of open space that no one had officially agreed on, but that everyone clearly understood. He had seen this kind of arrangement before, in other places. It was not peace exactly. It was the habit of people who had decided that not fighting was easier than fighting, at least for now, at least on market day. He bought what he needed from the man at the general store. The man gave him his change without looking up from the counter. On the way out, an older woman standing on the steps glanced past him toward the eastern end of the square and said to no one in particular that she did not see why they were permitted to come in on market days at all. Eli did not answer her. He loaded the cart and drove home. He was back at the property by midday. It was late in the afternoon when he first saw her. He had come around the south side of the fence line to check the drainage work, and when he straightened up and looked toward the road, she was there, standing maybe 50 yards past the far edge of his property line. Her hair was loose and dark over her shoulders. She was looking at his land with the kind of stillness that takes effort, the kind that is a decision. She did not move toward him. He did not call out. He looked at her for a moment, then went back to the drainage channel. When he finished and looked up again, she was gone. He did not know how long she had been standing there before he noticed, or how long she had been watching. He did not think much about it. Orcs moved through this part of the country. They had their reasons, and their reasons were their own. At evening, he ate standing at the window, looking out at the fields in the fading light. The stone was on the sill where it always was. At some point, without deciding to, he picked it up. He turned it once in his hand. The weight of it was something he had stopped noticing years ago, and then noticed again after she died. The way you notice the weight of things when they are the last things left. He set it back down. The ridge went dark. He went to bed. 2 days after that, she came to his gate. He was in the yard that morning working on the hinge of the barn door. The hinge had rusted through on one pin, and the door had been dragging in the dirt since he arrived. He had it propped open with a length of scrapwood and was working the old pin free with a punch and a hammer when he looked up and saw her. She was at the gate, not through it. Her hands were at her sides, the way they had been when she stood on the road 2 days before. She was not asking permission, she was not doing anything at all, just standing there looking at the yard. He set the hammer down on the barn step. He did not reach for anything else. He did not move toward her yet either. He looked at her from across the yard. She looked back. The morning was dry and still. The only sound was the creek to the north, running so low in the dry spell that it was more of a suggestion than a sound. Some weeks it was loud enough to hear from the house. Not lately. He did not know how long they stood like that. Long enough that a crow landed on the fence post between them and then flew off again without either of them moving. He walked across the yard toward her, not quickly and not slowly. He stopped a few feet back from the gate and looked at her from close up for the first time. She was taller than she had seemed from 50 yards away, a full head taller than him, maybe more. Her hair was black and thick, loose over her shoulders. Her skin was gray-green, her eyes were dark and level, and she looked at him the way he looked at a piece of work before starting it, measuring it without hurry. "What do you need?" he said. She did not answer right away. When she did not explain herself more than the question required. "Water," she said. "My creek has run too low to use. I saw your well." He thought about it. There was not much to think about. He had water, and she needed it. That was a simple enough problem. "Gates not locked," he said, and he went back to the barn hinge. She came through without a word. He heard the rope going down, the bucket, the rope coming back up, she worked the way she stood. No waste, no noise. She did what she came to do, and nothing else. When he glanced over, she had finished, and was standing with her filled vessel looking at the yard, not at him at the barn, at the south field, at the well she had just used. Taking the measure of the place, he said nothing. He went back to work. She did not leave right away. She stood there a while longer, and he was aware of her the way you are aware of something large that has chosen to be still, not threatening. Just a presence that he found himself registering without deciding to. Then she left. He heard the gate latch behind her. Not trust, not yet. Not anything that had a word for it. Just two people who had been in the same yard without making it harder than it needed to be. She came back the next morning. He was already at work when he heard the gate. He was in the south field, pulling fence wire tight along the line he had been putting up in sections since the week before. The morning was cool and overcast, the kind that makes the land look older than it is, everything flat and colorless under a low gray sky. He looked up. She had the clay vessel with her. He said nothing. She went to the well. He went back to the wire. He heard the rope going down, the water coming up. He had heard those sounds every morning since arriving at this place, and had never thought much about them. He thought about them now because they were hers and not his. She filled the vessel and set it down in the grass. Then she came to the fence line and looked at the section of wire he had not finished. She did not say anything. She picked up the end post lying in the grass and held it in place against the wire. He drove the staple. She held the next one. He drove another. They worked down the line without discussing it, and by the end the wire was up and the morning was an hour older. He set the hammer down. She stepped back and looked at the finished line. Apparently it was done well enough. She went back to her vessel. They had not spoken yet. The overcast had begun to thin. Somewhere in the scrub behind the south field a bird started up and then stopped. The yard was very quiet. He was starting on the gate latch when she stopped. He heard it before he saw it, the way you hear a sound go absent when you were not aware of the sound until it was gone. Her movement, her breath. He looked up. She was standing near the fence corner, looking at him with the same level look she had used since the first morning. But it was different now. She was not measuring the yard or the wire. She was measuring him, and she had already made up her mind about something. "Do you have a mate, human?" she said. He went still, not quiet, not thoughtful. Still. The word for it was still. He did not deflect, and he did not answer quickly, and he did not say anything to fill the gap. He looked down at what he had in his hands, which was the gate latch, a plain iron piece, and he set it on the top rail very carefully, the way you set something down when you need your hands to be empty. Then he looked at nothing in particular. "I had one," he said. 3 words, past tense. She did not move. She had come to this with 2 possible answers, yes and no. He had given her neither. He had given her the past tense, and she did not have a place for that. The question she had asked was built for the living, and he had answered from somewhere outside it. He picked up the latch. He went back to the gate. She watched him for a long time. He worked steadily. He drove the 2nd pin and the 3rd, and he did not look at her, and the silence between them had a weight to it that was not a word and not yet a name. It was not grief on display, not even sadness, exactly. It was the way a man states a fact about the ground under his feet, ground that was there before him and would be there long after. She had no word for that in her language. If her people had one, she had not learned it yet. He drove the last pin. He set the hammer down. He did not fill the silence, and she did not ask him to. She had not planned to stay. The water was in the vessel. and the fence wire was up, and there was nothing left in this yard that required her presence. She stayed anyway. She stood near the fence corner with the vessel at her feet, and she watched him work, and neither of them said another word. She was still in the yard when morning came. He had not offered her a place to sleep. He had not told her to go, either. She had simply not gone. And in the morning she was there, near the well, using water from it, which he had said she could have. She had her vessel with her. That was the whole of it. He watched her from the window for a moment. The morning was grey and still, the ridge behind the south field still in shadow. Then he went to get his boots. The barn had a problem he had been putting off since he arrived. The main cross beam above the south stalls had shifted, pulling loose from its mortise on the east end. He could see the gap from the floor. It needed to be lifted back into place and pinned before the weight of winter hay split the joint clean through. He could not do it alone. He had been thinking about hiring someone from Greyford to help, and about how long that would take, and whether he had the coin for it right now. He had been thinking about it for 3 weeks, and had done nothing. He went outside. She was at the well, not looking at him. He walked toward her, and she looked up when he got within speaking distance. "I have a beam in the barn that needs to be reset," he said. "It takes 2 people to lift it. I can't do it alone." She waited. "I can offer a place to sleep. I'll leave food out. You'd have the well as long as you need it. I'd want the help for a week, maybe 2. She looked at the barn. She looked back at him. "I have no camp near here," she said. "I was moving through, and the dry spell changed my route. I have nothing that requires me to be anywhere for the next month." He nodded. "You can use the barn, not the main room. The loft above the east stalls is clear." "I'll put a lantern up." "That is acceptable," she said. "Then we have an arrangement." Agreed. That was the whole of the negotiation. She did not ask what else she might owe him, or what other conditions applied. He did not add any. They stood in the yard for a moment, and then he went to show her the beam. It was a good 2 feet above his reach. She looked up at it without speaking, then walked the full length of the south wall, and looked at where it joined the post on the far end. She told him what they would need, and what order to do it in. She did not ask if he had an opinion. She stated the approach plainly, and it was the right approach, and he went to find the equipment. They spent most of the day on scaffolding and measurement, careful and unhurried. She did not rush it, and neither did he. By late afternoon, the rigging was in place. The actual lifting would come tomorrow. She said it would take 1 hour. He looked up at the beam, and was not certain of that, but he did not say so. That evening he sat by the fire after she had gone to the loft. He did not know exactly when the stone had come to be on the floor near his boot. He had not put it there on purpose. He left it where it was. He sat for a while with his hands open in his lap, watching the fire go low, not thinking about anything in particular. That was the arrangement. It lasted longer than either of them said it would. On the first day she lifted the beam. He had not believed her when she said it would take 1 hour. It took closer to 2, and during that time she directed the work, telling him where to brace and when to hold and when to push, and he followed because she clearly knew what she was doing, and there was no point in having an opinion about it. By mid-morning the beam was back in its mortise, pinned and braced, and the sound the barn had been making when north wind came through had stopped. He climbed up and checked the joint twice. He did not say anything about having been wrong about the hour. She did not remark on it either. She swept out the debris from the scaffolding, stacked the planks against the south wall, and went to wash her hands at the trough. On the second day he left bread and hard cheese on the step of the loft ladder before he went out to work. Not a plate, just the food, set there. She had already been awake for some time when he did it. He did not look at whether she was watching. That evening, the bread and cheese were gone. On the third day, she replaced the cracked stave in the water trough. He had known it needed doing since his first week on the property. Every time he filled the trough, the water seeped out from the bottom joint, slow enough to look like sweating wood if you did not know what you were seeing. He had been meaning to get to it. He had been meaning to get to it for longer than he wanted to admit. When he came in from the south field at midday, the trough was full and holding. He crouched and looked at the stave join. She had fitted it cleanly, better than he would have done. He thought about that for a moment, then went to see where she had sourced the wood. She had used a piece of scrap from the pile behind the barn and left the rest sorted the way he kept it. The homestead had begun to look like two people lived in it, not dramatically. He had to look for it to see it. A second set of tracks through the mud near the well, a length of rope coiled near the gate. That was not his coil. Each morning, the blanket she slept under appeared folded over the top rung of the loft ladder, put there the same way every time, as though she understood that the barn was his space and she was in it by agreement and not by right. He did not know if that was what it was. He chose not to think too hard about it. On the fourth evening she came into the barn while he was checking the crossbeam joint, and she said, "The gate hinge will go again before winter. The weld is cracked on the underside. I can fix it." He had not noticed. He was not going to say that. "Tomorrow is fine," he said. She went back to the loft. He went back to the joint. That was the first time either of them had said anything that was not strictly part of the arrangement they had made. He stayed in the barn for a while after she had gone up, one hand on the beam, listening to the building settle in the evening wind. She had volunteered something. He had accepted it. That was all it was, not warmth yet. Something closer to the absence of the bracing he had been doing since she arrived. The quiet, waiting for some friction that had not come. He was still waiting. But whatever he had been holding against it had loosened, and that was something he had not expected and did not yet have a word for. The cut happened in the afternoon. He had been clearing accumulated debris from the high corner of the barn where the crossbeam met the east wall, working from a plank set across two sawhorses. There was a rusted bracket up there, old iron, and when he reached past it, the edge of the metal caught his forearm on the way back, not deep enough to worry about, deep enough that it bled faster than he expected. He came down and wrapped it himself with a strip of cloth from his work bag and went back to what he was doing. She was in the yard when he came out an hour later to get water, and she looked at the rag on his arm the way she looked, at work that was not done properly. She did not ask. She crossed the yard to him, reached out and took his wrist with both hands, and turned his arm to look at what he had done. He let her. The rag was already soaked through, and the knot had come loose. "Sit down," she said. He sat on the edge of the well. She went to the house without asking, and he did not stop her. He heard her in there for a moment, and then she came back out with the tin. He kept on the kitchen shelf, the one with the linen strips and the drawing salve. She undid what he had done. She cleaned the cut with water from the bucket, and looked at it for a moment without speaking, and then applied the salve and wrapped it properly. 2 fingers' width of linen, firm and even. She did not look at his face while she did it. She looked at the work. He said nothing. She said nothing either. There was nothing that needed saying. When it was done, she set the tin on the well ledge beside him, and went back to what she had been doing. That evening they both ended up near the fire. He had not planned it. The light had gone early, and the air had dropped cold, and she had come out of the barn and sat down on the far side of the fire without asking, and he was already there. They sat on opposite sides of it with perhaps 10 feet between them. They did not speak much. He said something about the weather, and she made a sound that was not quite an answer. That was all. But the silence was different from the silence they had been sitting in for the past week. That one had been held in place by effort. This one was not. At some point he had taken the stone out of his pocket without thinking about it. It was sitting on the ground, near his boot, in the firelight. At some point he noticed she was looking at it, not asking, not pointing. Just looking the way she looked at most things, with the same level attention she gave to work. She was assessing. She did not ask about it. He did not explain it. After a while she looked back at the fire. Not friendship yet. Not the word that was going to come later. Something simpler. At some point during that hour, when his hands had been unsteady and he had not said anything about it, she had looked and had not looked away. She had seen what needed doing, and she had done it. That was not nothing, whatever else it was or was not. It had become a thing they did in the evenings, sitting by the fire. Not decided. Just the way it went, each of them ending up there when the day's work was done. The nights had gotten cold in the way they do before autumn settles in for good, and the fire was the warmest place on the property, and they had both stopped pretending they had somewhere else to be once the light was gone. She had been sitting across from him for a while, not speaking, when she said, "The stone." He looked up. "In your pocket," she said. "And before that on the ground near your boot, and before that, I think, on the windowsill. What is it?" She did not say it as a question exactly. She said it, the way she said most things, as a fact. She expected him to confirm or fill in with the directness she applied to everything she considered worth knowing. He looked at the fire for a moment. He reached into his pocket and took the stone out and held it in his open hand. "My wife carried it," he said, "for years. I don't know where she found it. After she died, I put it on the windowsill because I didn't know what else to do with it." He turned it once, set it back in his palm. That's the whole of it," he said. She was quiet for a long time. He did not explain further, and she did not ask him to. Then she said, "I had a brother. He waited. He was the only family I still had near me. He died 2 winters ago. I was not there. I have thought about that more than I should." That was all she said. She looked at the fire and did not add anything, and he did not ask her to. He did not say he was sorry. He did not say anything about what she had told him, did not reach for a phrase that would make the shape of it neater. He sat with it the way she had sat with what he had told her about his wife, which was quietly, with his hands open and his mouth shut, and without moving to fill any of it in. It was not the same grief, not the same shape, not the same wound, not the same kind of gone. But grief has a form that people recognize even when the language is different and the loss is not remotely alike. He had recognized it in the way she said it, not in the words. In the space around them, in the way she had placed the fact down between them and then stopped, the way you set something heavy on a table and take your hands off it. He recognized that. He set the stone on the ground in front of him, not toward her, just there, in the open, outside his pocket and outside his hand. She looked at it. She did not reach for it. She looked at it the way she looked at the fence wire and the barn beam and the gate hinge, with the full level attention she gave to things she was trying to understand. She was quiet for a long time. Then she looked back up at the fire and let the stone be where it was. They sat there until the fire had burned down to coals, low and red and no longer giving much light. At some point he thought she might get up and go back to the loft. She didn't. Neither of them moved to add wood, and neither of them moved to leave. 3 weeks had passed since the arrangement was made, and the homestead showed it. The east stall gate had been rehung. The trough held water through the night without leaking. The section of yard between the well and the barn had been cleared of the accumulated debris that had been sitting there since before he arrived. Old branches, broken hardware, the rusted frame of something he had never been able to identify. She had done most of this without being asked and without saying she was going to. The place looked less like a man barely keeping himself occupied, and more like a property that someone intended to keep. She was in the barn when the rider came. He saw the horse before he heard it, coming down the road from Greyford, at a steady trot, a man in a grey coat, upright in the saddle, not in a hurry and not looking for trouble. He had a document bag at his hip. He pulled up at the gate and waited, which was the polite way to do it, and he kept his hands where they could be seen, which was also the polite way. Eli went to the gate. "Morning," the man said. "I'm looking for Eli Marsh. Name's Harlan. I'm with the land office out of Greyford." He reached into the bag at his hip and produced a folded paper, sealed. "I've been asked to deliver this. There's been a formal notice filed. A property holder to the north has raised a concern about the occupancy situation here." "Occupancy situation," Eli said. "The ordinance for human-titled parcels in this district requires that any non-human resident of a property be registered through the land office. If there's no registration on file, the landholder is subject to a compliance review." Harlan held the notice out. His voice was even. He was reading from something he had said many times before. "I'm not here to make a ruling. I'm here to deliver the notice. You have 30 days to file a response." Eli took the paper. She had come to the barn doorway somewhere in the middle of this. She was standing with one hand on the frame, not moving, watching the way she watched everything, without making herself smaller or stepping back from sight. Harlan looked at her once. His expression did not change. He looked back at Eli. 30 days, Eli said. "That's what the notice says." Harlan gathered his reins. "I'll note that you received it. That's all I need from you today." He rode back up the road toward Greyford. He did not look back. Eli stood at the gate for a while after the horse was out of sight. He folded the notice once and put it in his coat pocket. He stood there a while longer looking at the road and not at anything in particular. When he turned around, she was still in the barn doorway, watching him. He walked back across the yard without saying anything, and she went back to what she had been doing. That evening he told her what the paper said. He sat across the fire from her and read through it twice before he started, and then he told her plainly what it contained, without adding his opinion about it and without taking anything away from what Harlan had said. She was quiet when he finished. "Then I will go," she said, not frightened, not angry, flat and practical, the way she said most things, as though she were identifying the next step in a problem that had a straightforward solution. He did not answer right away. He looked at the fire. "Not yet," he said. The morning felt different before they arrived. He noticed it when he went out to the well. Not a sound or a sight, just something in the air, the way a landscape changes quality when more people than belong there are moving through it. He was at the barn door when the horses came over the rise. 3 riders, Harlan in front and 2 men behind him that Eli had not seen before. They were not hurrying. They were riding the way people ride when they have already decided how a morning is going to go. She came out of the barn and stood behind him. He was aware of her there. Harlan pulled up short of the gate and did not dismount. This was different from last time. Last time he had waited at the gate and been polite about it. This time he stopped in the road and looked at Eli the way a man looks at something that is not cooperating. 30 days was a courtesy, Harlan said. "I've been asked by the men on the North Road to make the matter plain. The ordinance isn't optional. There are people in this district who aren't going to wait for the paperwork to sort itself out. Eli said nothing. She needs to go. Harlan was looking at Eli when he said it, not at her. At Eli as though she were a piece of property he had failed to move. Today would be better. End of the week is the outside of what anyone's willing to give. He still said nothing. He stood at the gate with his hands open at his sides, and looked at Harlan, and did not look at the two men behind him. She moved. Not toward Harlan, not toward the gate. She stepped forward and to the side, so that she was standing beside Eli instead of behind him. She did not say anything. She looked at the middle distance, at nothing, the way she looked when she was waiting for something to be finished. Harlan looked at her. He looked at Eli. He looked at the gate between them and the ground and back at her. He counted something silently. He looked at her again. The two men behind him had not spoken. One of them shifted in his saddle. The other was very still. Neither Eli nor the orc girl moved. They did not raise a hand or raise a voice. They did not step forward, and they did not step back. They stood on his land, on the ground inside his gate, and they were simply there. It was not a threat they were making, not a warning, not a performance. It was just the two of them standing in the yard of a property that had been repaired and was being worked and was not abandoned. Harlan had brought enough men for a different kind of morning than this one. Something moved across Harlan's face. Not fear, exactly. Something quieter than that. The recognition that this was a different kind of ground than he had expected to stand on, and that the calculation he had made before riding out here had not accounted for what he was actually looking at. He gathered his reins. "We'll be back," he said. "This isn't settled." He turned his horse and the two men followed. They rode back up the road the way they had come, at the same unhurried pace, and they did not look back. Eli watched until they were gone from sight. He did not move until the road was empty. She watched, too. When the last rider crested the rise and disappeared, she turned and went back into the barn. He heard her picking up where she had left off. He stood at the gate a while longer, then he went back to work too. Harlan did not come back. A week passed, and then another, and the road from Greyford stayed empty. No second notice arrived from the land office. No rider came. The pressure did not disappear exactly. It retreated the way weather retreats, still present in the way the air felt, but no longer a thing with a shape to it. He did not talk about it, neither did she. They went back to the work of the homestead. The rhythm was the same. He at the south field in the mornings, she at whatever needed doing, the yard between them as occupied and efficient as it had been for the past month. But there was something different in the way they passed each other in that yard. Not warmer, not easier, in any obvious way, just less careful. He had been doing a particular kind of work since she arrived, the quiet work of not startling something that might bolt, and somewhere in the week after the standoff that work had stopped, or at least stopped being necessary. The thing he had been bracing against had not come. At some point he had stopped waiting for it. One evening in the second week after the standoff, she was already at the fire when he came in from the south field. She had put a pot on, and there was food in it that she had made from what was in the larder. She had not asked. She had simply done it the way she did most things, without explaining herself, and without waiting for permission. He got 2 plates from the shelf and put them on the table. She sat down across from him. They ate. It was the first time they had sat at the same table, both of them in chairs at the same level, without the fire or the yard between them. Just the table and 2 plates, and the evening coming in through the window. He had not thought about what that would be like. He had gotten the plates and put them down, and she had sat across from him, and it had been exactly as ordinary as it appeared. He said something about the salt. She handed it across without looking up. Something in that exchange, the plainness of it and the ease of it was so ordinary, it was almost startling. He looked at the window after. She looked at her food. He had not planned to reach for the stone. It was on the table where he had left it before washing up, which was not where it usually ended up, and his hand went to it without him deciding to. He turned it once, set it back down. He was looking at the window when he did it. He did not know she was watching until he looked back and caught the direction of her attention. She was looking at his hand, or at the stone, or at both. She did not look away when he noticed, and he did not move to put it away. She also did not say anything. Neither did he. Not a family. Not the word for it in his language or in hers. But the table had 2 plates on it, and neither of them had put the second one there by accident. When he went to the door later to look at the sky before going to bed, he stopped in the yard and looked toward the south field instead. The light was almost gone. Along the near edge of the field where he had turned the clay and planted what he had not expected to come up, there was a low, even line of green running the length of the furrow. Narrow still, the kind of thing you had to look for to see, but there spring did not arrive all at once. It came the way things come back after a hard season. First, the green edge along the south field, then more of it, and then one morning the whole field looked different, and he could not have said when the change had happened. The east fence held, the barn roof held, the trough held water without losing any, and the gate latch turned without catching. She had repaired the north fence line too, the section that had been sagging since before he arrived. The work he had done, and the work she had done, and the work they had done together had accumulated in the way work accumulates when someone stays with it, and the homestead showed it. She was still there. He did not think about this anymore as a surprising fact. It was just the way things were. 2 sets of boot tracks in the mud by the well, a second voice in the yard when she said something about the drainage, or the seed, or the weather, the blanket folded on the loft ladder rung every morning like it had always been there. She was part of the place now, the way the well was part of the place, and the gate was part of the place, part of the morning, not incidental, not separate. He noticed one morning in early spring, before she was up, standing in the yard with something warm in his hands, that he was not lonely. He noticed it the way you notice a sound has stopped, by the absence, not the thing itself. He had been so used to a particular weight in his chest that he had stopped registering it as weight, the same way you stop hearing the creak after enough mornings. It was quiet now. The part of him that had been braced for years, waiting to be more alone than he already was, had simply gone quiet somewhere between the standoff, and the shared table, and the fire, and all the ordinary days that did not add up to any one thing. He had not planned for any of it. He had the stone in his hand. He looked at it for a long time in the early light. Then he walked to the edge of the south field, to where the green line had come in first, and he pressed the stone into the soil there. Not deep, just down, where the earth was soft from the spring wet, not a burial, not a goodbye, a placement. Something carried for a long time, set down now in the ground he was standing on, among the things that were growing. He stood there for a while after. She found him there when she came out of the barn. She looked at his empty hand, and at the ground, and back at him. "All right," she said. "Yeah," he said. That was all. Not an ending. Not even a beginning, exactly. Something in between, the part that comes after the roof holds, when you stop looking up, every time the wind picks up to check. The quiet after the work, which is not the same thing as silence. Far up on the ridge, a rider was moving west, going somewhere this story had not yet gone. The world beyond the fence had not finished moving. It never did. Not everything heals, but some things hold if you tend them. A roof that stops the rain and a field that comes up. That is what enough looks like. Did you enjoy the story? Subscribe to the channel to watch more stories like this one. Leave a like. It helps the channel a lot. And drop a comment down below. I always read them and use your feedback to make our content better. Thanks.